you all very, very much for coming to Mysterious Bookshop tonight.
Woo!
We are very, very happy to have Lyndsay here tonight. And we are here to celebrate her new novel, Gods of Gotham, which is hopefully the first in the Timothy Wilde series. If you guys haven't read it, you guys are going to absolutely love it. It's one of the best books of the year. It's awesome. Obvious Edgar Award contender, without a doubt.
Winner!
Just give him another drink.
Along with this book, we have Gabe has created a wonderful cocktail for us tonight called the Gods of Gotham. If you haven't tried it, please do. It's amazing. So Lyndsay is going to do a little reading tonight, talk about writing the book, talk about doing some research and all that kind of fun stuff, and then she's going to answer all kinds of questions.
Really?
All kinds of questions. And then afterwards, she'll sign some books for you guys. You guys can drink some more champagne, have a good time, and that will be it. So without further ado, Lyndsay Faye.
Thank you to the Mysterious Bookshop for hosting this. Hello, prettiest bookshop in the world. And my favorite, I asked them if I could set up a cot just in that corner and live there. And they said it might lower their reputation. And they said no.
To have an author in the corner.
Authors shouldn't live here.
Gabe would miss you.
All right. And then, Gabriel, please, making the Gods of Gotham cocktail was so cool.
Yes.
And Louis and Mark for making it along with Gabe. Thank you. Who doesn't want to read from my book for a super long time because I figure you're here because you learned to read. And the voices in your head are probably a lot better than the voices that I can produce. So I'd rather talk about how I came to write Gods of Gotham and how it came to exist, and then you can ask me anything because I trust your opinion of what we should talk about a lot better than I trust my own opinion of what we should talk about. So just to start things off, people often ask me what inspired the Gods of Gotham, and this was kind of odd. I had an image in my head from out of nowhere of a little girl who was running through dark metropolitan streets, and she was covered in blood that was not her own. And it was just a picture I had in my head. William Faulkner, who wrote a much, much better book that I called The Sound and the Fury, talks about sometimes how Caddy, being up a tree with muddy underpants, that picture haunted him as well and led him to write The Sound and the Fury. On the other hand, my book has more murder. Murder would go with mine, and not The Sound and the Fury, so I got that going for me. And I didn't know who the unfortunate blood-soaked girl was going to be. I didn't know her name. I didn't know where she was going. I didn't know what would happen to her or what had happened to her, but I thought the picture was really riveting. And eventually, that little girl became Bird Daly. And Bird Daly, in the prologue, is the character who sets the whole story in motion. So it's always odd to recall the germination of a character and how someone who you didn't know turns into someone that you kind of invented but love. So that was a pretty cool tale in my own personal writing life. So secondly, I wanted to tell the story of Day 1, Cop 1 of the NYPD. That's the goal. Day 1, Cop 1, right? And I do mean the very first police officers, like, we're talking the patient zero guy. Like, because origin tales fascinate me, and particularly regarding any institution that is established and venerable and sort of renowned worldwide at this point. Like, how did it begin? So I wanted to know, what did they do, the NYPD, in the days before forensics was a science? And when no one had any notion of how to solve crimes in the first place. And I thought that was a fascinating idea, and I wanted to run with it, and I wanted to tell the story of the first cops who had no mentors. They wouldn't have. They would have just had themselves maybe The Night Watch, but they were notoriously terrible. So that was the story that I wanted to tell. It was more of a mythology than it was, you know, I wanted to make their tale real at the very, very, very beginning. So as to how I wrote it, I always spend 6 months researching my topics, and that takes a while. So this, but the best, the serious historical crack on my part, right? When I hit the crack, and it's so good, are like newspapers, diaries, old plays and satires, slang, dictionaries, travel guides, cookbooks are brilliant. Anything that I can get my hands on that involves the sights, sounds, smells of the world that I'm trying to inhabit. And I think that everyone here who knows me as a former actor, there's several of you. Hey! You realize that getting the vernacular in my head is really important to me. So, so I study histories that outline the world in question and provide something of a skeleton for the storytelling. And then I try to find original documents that are in the voices of the people who lived at the time, and that serves as the skin of the story and the details and the way people saw the world. And I poach different things from different sources. So, but all of it is really interesting for me. And regarding the mid-19th century, which we're talking about, New York City was just coming into its own as the unofficial economic clearinghouse of the nation due to our stupidly gorgeous harbor. Think of it that way. Y'all have seen it. It's nearby. But by virtue of having like a thriving shipping industry, other trades developed alongside the seaports. So most importantly from my research, Manhattan by 1845 was the center of the publishing world in North America, or they said they were, which is sort of the same thing. And they recently birthed a brand new, super sexy genre. This genre is not necessarily something that happens now, but as I say in Gotham's historical afterword, it was essentially non-fiction urban sensationalism. And what these authors did was that they related alternately harrowing and uplifting accounts of life in the city and how the people who were disenfranchised would live in the city. Half of them were positive experiences, half of, you know, the alcoholic who ultimately survives to, you know, love his wife and bring home the paycheck. The other half was, you know, the hot corn seller, 7-year-old dying on the street corner. It was horrifying. So the shocking urban tell-alls that I was culling a lot of these facts from, they had reams of grim material to cull from because New York physically was incapable of housing its population in 1845. In 1800, New York consisted of 60,000 people, and in 1850, 500,000.
Wow.
So think about that. For you folks who are poor at math, I'm poor at math. I whipped out a calculator earlier at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I did this. Don't thank me.
It's better than 2 in the morning.
Right? That's a growth of 440,000 people in 50 years, and it would have been impossible. So New York City itself, it was, at the same time it was a thriving metropolis, it was a crazy cow town. And the Astor Hotel would have witnessed cattle drives going up Broadway. Posh neighborhoods would have been plagued by the free-roaming pigs that just wandered about the town, and Dickens used to write about them, which is brilliant. And the destitute, including the destitute who were emigrating due to the Irish potato famine and due to the fact that they had no options left in their home country, they would have been left to a large extent to fend for themselves. So, since that research for me is super interesting, anything but dull, and reporters at the time were actually wallowing in the squalor of the city, pornographically wallowing, and just like, this is the messiest city ever, I'm gonna write about it. I'm going to read a small excerpt from my research, which is going to convey to you that I have fun research. This is from New York in Slices by an experienced carver. That is, the experienced carver is the author, theoretically. 1849. The original Slices were published in the New York Tribune. So I'm going to read these. And this is the sort of research I get to do. Quote, "These noisome and infected cells, not bigger nor higher than coffins, are crammed with wretches, layer above layer, and oh so horribly filthy, worm-eaten and abominable, that death would blush through his grinning skeleton to call them his. 500 of such poor wretches are sometimes crowded into a single room, where there is not absolutely space enough for them to all lie down at once and die. In other portions of the establishment, you meet with gangs of blear-eyed drunkards with their poor brains vacillating fearfully between idiocy and madness." Like, yeah.
Burn. It sounds like the New York bar scene.
Here are groups of diseased and abandoned women pouring out blasphemies and all the atrocities of language in a manner that would make the most hardened man-villain shudder. And I want to see a show of hands, end quote, if you would self-identify as a man-villain. It's not gender-specific. If you're a girl, it's cool. You can be a girl, and I didn't self-identify. Cool. That's the sort of thing that I'm researching. Super dry. Okay, so then after about 6 months and I've read enough of that kind of material, I locked myself in an apartment, my apartment, like a crazed bearded hermit, for 4 or 5 months, and I write it, and that's the part where you lovely, wonderful people don't see me for 4 or 5 months at a time.
Where'd you put Gabe?
What? Gabe does, but he doesn't like me during those times. I'm still rapidly, like,
I believe that's why I have a studio.
Good.
Bravo.
And as to the writing process of the manuscripts, I never use outlines, but I do have what I call tent poles. So that's scenes and events that I know have to take place in the plot. And I write those first. So, for instance, there's a key scene between Timothy and his brother, Valentine Wilde, that takes place in chapter 22 of the Gods of Gotham that I wrote on the first day. I sat down to write the Gods of Gotham, and that was one of the first things that happened. So, as for the middle bits, I never know quite what I'm going to develop or how it's going to work out, but my characters, they ultimately end up telling me, and that's awesome because I'm lazy. So, if my characters know what they're doing, then yeah, brilliant.
It helps.
It does help. Regarding style, because the style of the Gods of Gotham has been chatted about over the past couple days, I think, I am a vocabulary nut. It's all true. And people in the 19th century, I think, used very colorful language, so admittedly Tim's style is quite ecstatic. We call it ecstatic in places. And he grew up on a Shakespeare diet like I did, so the word usage, there's some ways Tim's style is a bit flowery. And he's a romantic at heart, so there's that. But he also speaks in a lot of very short declaratives, and I wanted to make sure that he did. Short declaratives, also fragments, because I wanted to ensure that despite the use of slang, he would be relatively easy to understand if you made the sentences sort of brief and comprehensible. So the short, choppy sentences and the structure that's quite, you know, like simplistic, I think they help with that. If they don't tell me. And they give a noirish sort of like cop flavor to the narrative. If it doesn't, don't tell me. Super thank you. And then when the manuscript's finally finished, I weep with relief for about 2 days. You laugh because it's true. And then I get to editing, because writing is rewriting. So, like, theoretically, after ultimately the writing and the wailing, there's a lot of gnashing of teeth that happens as well. You have a manuscript that you're proud of, and I'm so thankful you're here, and I'm so thankful that I'm proud of this manuscript, and I'm so thankful it turned into a book. I couldn't be happier about it, and I'm so happy about it. I'm going to read you an itsy slice of it, and you're going to be subjected to it.
Yay!
Yay! Reading this book out loud, I should say this, by the way, marked a massive milestone for me when I first did it. It was for ABC Radio National Australia, and I don't speak Flash, so there's that. So there's a lot of Flash language happening in this book, and my acting chops have sort of fallen by the wayside, as one has noticed, knowing me, as I've not practiced them. So it's also a really stupid idea to write a book in a language that you half invented and don't speak. So that's not ever a good idea. But here we are. Okay, I'll give you a short excerpt from the Gods of Gotham, and then we'll do Q&A. Yeah, you can all have a cream tea on me or a cocktail, whatever you prefer. So I will read a bit of it. Ridiculous to write a book in a language you don't speak. Alright. Can we do the full on? Ninepin could will you. Excuse me. See how it doesn't work? Ninepin could will you both the whole scrap, if I please to. None trustier, and none belonging more heart and soul to Miss Underhill here, said the lad before me, his pocket knife worrying at something foreign stuck to the sole of his boot. Tip us a wedding copper, and I'll cackle like a right old tabby. Mr. Wilde, that is to say, he amended, glancing an unspoken apology at my companion. I sat next to Mercy in a cellar coffee and cake saloon on Pearl Street, sharing one side of a grimy booth, staring down my nose at an uncommonly fine example of New York's news hawkers. This one had reached the ripe age of 12, I thought, for the cigar in his grinning mouth was pretty well practiced, and his blue vest and knee-length purple trousers fit him well. He was experienced enough selling papers to afford to keep his clothing apace with his body, and anyway, a kitchen below 12 don't much like coffee. Rum, yes, but not coffee. The lad who'd introduced himself as Ninepin liked coffee considerably. We'd barely arrived and he was through his second cup. Now he's asking me, not unexpectedly, for something stronger. Suppose you cackle first, I suggested. Ninepin scowled. He had fiercely blonde hair, like a canary. His muscles of necessity and pugilism better developed than they should have been, and he'd scavenged a pair of gold ladies' reading spectacles. He kept taking them off, polishing the glass with a scarlet kerchief and making a particularly juicy point. Ain't as if I can't get it myself, is it? Free country and all that? Toady, he called to the saloon keeper. A pair of French creams, if you please. The barkeep walked over readily enough with 2 brandies. Ninepin then paid for them in a style that was, I have to admit, pretty fine. He passed one to Mercy. Why do you run off that way? He coaxed suggestively. It don't fadge, my pretty bloss, and here you're back with a bobby like enough to rub me to whip. I've no intention of arresting you, I simultaneously translated and replied. He ignored me. We're flusher alone, Miss Underhill. Do you think so? She asked him with a skewed smile, passing her cup over to me and ignoring the child's, which he was already sipping. Dead to rights. What if I told you that, while ever grateful for your company, I can't always grasp the sense of it? Ninepin blushed. Clearly unused to flirting and newly sad of the fact, it was so raw that it was hard to look at, like seeing a wet colt falling over. He pulled the cigar from his mouth, dipped the end in his coffee, and put it back. Don't pattern out other jargon, do I? Did I ever have kin what set me up with a brother of the quill? I ain't educated, just in love. She said slyly. It was a good job I was staring ruefully down at the brandy a 12-year-old seemed to have just purchased for me, because I know two looks flashed by under the brim of my hat. One was hearty amusement, which he wouldn't cotton to a bit, and the other was too embarrassing to admit to myself, so I let that pass.
Here, here.